from Carol's List. She's sitting right there. We're just letting people in. People have been sitting graciously in our digital waiting room, waiting for us to get started today on our Tuesday talk. And so it looks like we are getting more people in. I think we'll just go ahead and get started. We'll probably have more people joining us as we go on. Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Dudick. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Public Policy Institute of the Rockies. I'm here today with Pipper's co-founder and CFO, Sophie Moon, sitting right there, giving everyone a wave. We're hosting these Tuesday talks to further the Public Policy Institute of the Rockies mission, bringing attention to underaddressed issues in Montana, letting you know some of the people working on them, and also giving you the opportunity to learn how to get involved. This is also a great opportunity for you to have your questions answered. Today, we are thrilled to have with us Beth Campshire. She is the executive director of Carol's List. They're giving you a wave. Beth's first phone call to an elected official was when she was a Glendive fifth grader, when she was joined with some classmates and asking a legislator not to make education cuts during the session, which I think we can all relate to right now. The legislature in Montana is in session, and we're seeing a lot of cuts that aren't good. Beth has been an advocate ever since then. Her background includes communications consulting and day jobs running two small mighty nonprofits, including her job today at Carol's List, a journalism career overseas, working in greenhouses, and always trying to be a good partner, friend, colleague, and dog mom. So thank you so much, Beth, for being with us today. If you all have questions for her, please go ahead and put those in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure we try and get to those at the end. So Beth, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
We are thrilled to have you here. I just gave a short intro to you. Is there anything you want people to know before we start talking in depth about all of your work at Carol's List?
No, I think that covered it. I think we're just trying to have a through line of pretty much everything I've done for money in life is to try to make a difference.
Great. Well, so tell us now about the work you are doing at Carol's List.
Yes, as you mentioned, I'm the executive director of Carol's List. We are a small but mighty political action committee based in Montana. I think the best way to illustrate the work that we do at Carol's List, myself and my all-volunteer board, is to start by telling a very short story. And that begins when Carol Williams entered the Montana Senate in 2005. She gets elected, she enters the chamber and looks around and thinks, where are all the women? So to address this and to have more women represented in our state government, she and a number of other women legislators started a political action committee, which is now called Carol's List. And I think even 5 or 6 years ago, our work and the work of other organizations dovetailing with it had meant that women made up the majority of the Democratic caucus in the Senate and also in the House. And so it's just a decade of steady work asking women to run. Because as you know, Kim, women have to be asked something like 7 times before they're going to agree to run. It's a completely different thing with male legislators and decision makers. So many times they just think, yeah, I'm qualified, I'm going to do this. And women, because of the way we're socialized, that's not the case. And for women of color, that's even extra not the case. You don't see yourself in these positions of power, and if you can't see it, you can't be it. So that's been the work of Carol's List ever since Carol and a number of other kick-ass Montana women decided to start this PAC back in the day.
Well, I know I was elected for 8 years in the legislature, and during that time, fortunate enough to serve in the minority, but in the majority of that minority being women, although the men are great too. It's nice to see a lot of women there. You know, one thing you said there is that women have to be asked 7 times. You know, I actually had somebody recently say to me, well, can I run even if I'm not asked? I mean, what do you think about that? I know this woman thought she had to be asked to be in some sort of special club in order to run. And so, I mean, what do you say to people when they say things like that?
Absolutely not. You don't have to be asked. Put yourself out there. Um, but you're right. I mean, it's the permission seeking that so many women do because of the way we're socialized. And again, women of color face intersectional barriers that people who identify as white ladies certainly don't. Um, but it's the asking. So we do that, but we also will chat with people. Especially recently, I have noticed there are women stepping up after the disaster, from our perspective of the 2020 elections in Montana. There are women that I had heard are running for different, school board, municipal elections, even thinking of legislature at this point, who I did not call, or my board didn't call, or our friends didn't call and ask. They're just doing it. And so it's even more awesome to be in touch with them and make the follow-up call of, thank you for running. How can we help with resources? Do you have any questions? It's basically what are your hopes and dreams, and also what are your fears and any barriers that you have, and really just having that conversation so that we can help steer them towards resources or help them in some way with something that they feel like they don't know how to do.
So, what are the programs that you have at Carol's List that you want people to know about?
Right now, one of the programs we've had going since February has been an early training series. And this is for anyone who IDs as a woman who's even thought about running for office. I have often referred to it as ledge curious, but it can be serving at any level. And it's not even, you have to, it's not as though you sign up for one of these early training sessions and, I'm going to be hounding you to file to run for the legislature, next year. No, sometimes from the curiosity point to actually filing to run, that can be a number of years or months, depending on where someone's at in their journey. These early training sessions have been really informal. And Kim, you attended one, so you could probably speak to the the connections and the informality that of the session that you attended. But because we are in a tough legislative session, as you mentioned, cuts, that's one thing. Really, really, really bad bills that make people feel like they're not welcome in this state if they're not a straight white guy. And I felt like having a forum that can do some training and also build some community with like-minded women was going to be really important during this legislative session.
So, if somebody was interested in those training sessions, how could they access them?
People who are interested in those early training sessions can go to our website, which is carolslistmt.org.
Why do you think it's so important that we have at least an equal number of male and female representatives in our legislature or any elected office in general?
I would love to ask you all that.
I know, right? But I'm asking you.
Yeah. Well, you're living proof of that, Kim. Someone who served in the legislature for 4 terms, and I think I gave you a shout out on the training sesh that you showed up at. But this woman here was easily one of the most effective people in the legislature, of all time. I think you hold a record for number of bills passed. I can't remember if it's, in the last 10 years or what have you, but the number one reason that Carol's List exists is because it's not just, let's have equal numbers of women there. No, it's about policy outcomes as well. And our organization is a political, political PAC. And so we're not a nonprofit C3 or a C4, we're an actual 527 political PAC. And so from our standpoint, we understand that getting progressive women elected leads to better policy outcomes for all of us, whether that's women's healthcare, making sure that public education is funded, Making sure that our lands and waters are in good shape. I mean, studies show that women legislators get more bills passed, which are living proof of that, and also the bills are progressive and reflect progressive values.
When you say progressive values, I mean, just for so people, maybe who aren't in the lingo, what do you mean by that?
That's a great question. Last time around, so one of the things that Carol's List does for candidates, in addition to training and recruiting, we also do an endorsement process that you were part of last time, Kim, and also, in your runs for legislature as well. But just this past session, our endorsement questionnaire covered, I believe, three really big buckets of issues. The first one is reproductive rights and choice for women. So we only endorse women candidates who are declaring that they are pro-choice. That's the number one issue for us. The other issue that was in our endorsement questionnaire last time around was public education and full funding for that, including pre-K or kindergarten or pre-K. And then the third bit was making sure that the expanding of Medicaid that got passed last session was going to be preserved. We wanted to make sure we were endorsing candidates that were going to fight for that if they were elected. So those were the three issues in 2020 that we considered our bedrock progressive values as an organization. In future races, that's a decision what our endorsement questionnaire looks like between mostly my board members and me.
That's great. Thanks for explaining that. So one thing we've been hearing from people who have actually been in the legislature and lobbying for or against bills and really in the mix there. But you said that you're not and these are tax issues, a 501c3 or a 501c4. And so you said you're a PAC. We hear a lot that PACs are bad, money in politics is bad. So would you tell us what you mean when you say you're a PAC and what that means as far as money?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that it means for us in terms of money, I guess personally, I would say I agree with most of all of us on the progressive side of things who say money in politics is really not a positive effect, et cetera, et cetera. However, we have to work through the system that we are currently in, not the system we wish we had. And with Montana campaign contribution limits currently being so low, our PAC will donate to candidates, but with $180 limit, it's not as though, we're coming in with $1 million so we can influence somebody's race or things like that. But for us, what it means is that we are not supported by grants in the same way that a C3 nonprofit, which is kind of non-political, and the C4 nonprofit, which is allowed to be, to endorse candidates and things like that. We don't have any grant funding. All of our funding comes from individuals in Montana and outside Montana, and also from other PACs. So that's how that works. And that was a bit of a steep learning curve for me, coming from the 501c3 world for almost 10 years before I started this job. But it's also wonderful because it means that we work with our individual donors really closely. And that was always my favorite type of fundraising when I was doing C3 work. And so it's been a good fit in that area.
So we've talked about some of the programs you have. Would you just maybe tell us in short, what are the problems that Carol's List is trying to solve, and then what are all the ways you're attempting to do that?
Well, I don't mean to be glib here, but basically the problem is just patriarchy, big umbrella, because that affects so many things. It affects the ability of really smart, amazing, talented women to just step forward and say, well, clearly I'm a leader, because of the way we're socialized. And so that's the big overarching umbrella problem, and how we are tinkering around the edges of that problem is by doing everything we can to uh, help women with resources, conversations, checking in, volunteers, anything that's going to help a woman candidate feel supported and like she's not having to do all of this by herself.
So let's say I'm not me, and let's say I'm thinking about running for office and I've never done it before. What would you suggest to be the first thing that I should do? Should I reach out to you at Carol's List, or what should my first step be?
I think it depends on the person. For example, let's say it's not you, but it's you from 10 years ago. From my understanding of your background with, nursing and your own law practice and things like that, I think back then I would have said, your background is pretty amazing. Why don't you talk to all of your friends from, law school? Think about, start drawing out your networks and then start to think, where are the holes? And then take it from there. There's a number of books people can read. I'm a big nerd, so I always think if I don't know something, I just Google it or I start looking up books to read or asking friends. But certainly calling Carol's List and having that initial conversation. If I personally can't help, I have board members who are more than willing to be chatting with people. And I also probably know somebody in your town who's run for office and would be happy to put you in touch with either the women or the great men that have served in the legislature now and in the past.
So I'm glad you mentioned men, because we've been talking a lot about women, and I think there's always kind of a rub there that some people think you can't support women without not supporting men, or you can't, want to promote women and not at the same time want to tear down men. How do you respond to those kind of thoughts?
I think that's a scarcity mindset. It's like, I don't have children, but I have experience with dogs. Just because I love my new puppy a lot doesn't mean that I love my dogs who have passed on any less. And I think it's the same thing with supporting really talented and wonderful people running for office. Clearly our mission is, if there's a pro-choice woman in a race against a man, we will back the woman every time, just because we need to be pushing back on these structural things that prevent women from really stepping into their leadership. I think I went to see Gloria Steinem speak at an event maybe 25, 30 years ago. I might be dating myself here. There was a gentleman who stood up in the crowd and asked her a similar question, but it was mostly like, why do you have to tear down men? And she made the point that when things are unequal, and let's say women start rising here and things like that, there are some people in this pile who are going to feel like they are being lowered, even though it's just becoming more equal, because it's a change. And so I get that kind of scarcity mindset, but at the same time, I also don't subscribe to it. I think there's enough to go around, and I think the numbers bear themselves out even after another record-breaking year nationally. This time with Republican women being elected, women are still only 28% of our Congress nationally, and we're 51% of the population. Yeah. So we got a lot of work to do still.
That we do. You'd mentioned some institutional barriers, and you talked a little bit earlier. I'm curious what Carol's List and how you're working to break down some of those institutional barriers, not only for gender, but more intersectionally, and how we can promote more minorities and have more equality there also. And what is Carol's List doing there to not ensure that we're just having, white women elected, but we want to have more equality?
I think this is on all of us who are part of the white patriarchal structures that are so powerful in Montana. there's still a lot of work to do. And recruiting candidates is not just about, for example, let's find a woman, warm body to fit this place, or we have all white people here, let's find somebody a little darker to fit into these places. It's all about relationship building and being able to empower other people and invite them into, how we're all trying to make change. And we have a lot of work to do in that regard. A lot more relationship building to do. A lot more people to meet outside the usual places where candidates get recruited out of, certain nonprofits, maybe legal profession, things like that. We can do better.
Well, thanks for giving all that information. How can people become involved with Carol's List? Like, what is your contact information and what can they do?
People can go to our website. As I mentioned, that's carolslistmt.org. There's a sign up form there. So you'll be starting to receive some of our emails about early trainings, events that we'll have coming up, especially after hopefully people get vaccinated and we can all start meeting in person again. It's been a long year of Zoom events, as you all know, and here we are doing one right here. That's a great way to start. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, just to start getting a flavor of the kind of work that we're doing, early trainings, as I mentioned. The recruitment isn't super public, but I think it would be a fun thing to start. I started putting out kind of calls to action in terms of recruitment on our Instagram and Facebook during the session, using some of the terrible things that are moving through in the legislature as a way to touch women in our audience and say, if you're fed up with this, call us. Let's start thinking about how you can step into your leadership, whether that's running for office or volunteering on someone's campaign or any of the things that would suit. Introverts welcome. Also, you don't have to be out in front as the candidate to be part of this work.
All right. Well, I'm going to now turn it over to Sophie to ask some questions people would like to know answers to. We put the website in our chat box, and just keep the good questions coming. Beth is an expert on these issues, and let's really see what she has to say. So go ahead, Sophie. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim, and thank you so much, Beth, for joining us today. I have some questions from folks in the audience, and if people want to get a question and haven't asked it yet, go ahead and put it in the chat box or the Q&A section. So the first question here kind of has a little narrative in the front here. So Republicans seem to have a more uniform message across districts in running for office. Can Carol's List help develop a clear statewide set of reasons why we need to vote for progressive women in 2022, 2024, et cetera? I know all politics is local, but a statewide brand might help motivate voters.
That's a great question. I think that is the number one question that anyone involved in Montana progressive politics has been asking themselves and each other since we all woke up in November and saw the results. I just want to be really clear about what we're up against. You've probably all heard this before, but this has been, you've probably all heard this before. I won't be the first person saying this, but the media machine on that side of the aisle is real. If you look at the top organic posts on Facebook, it's all stuff from Dan Bongino, Fox News. You notice our Republican senator, our governor, our congressman, they're all in lockstep on message every time. And then it ends up, because they're saying it over and over and over, and it's swirling around on social media and then right-wing media as well, then it spills over into the mainstream. And then you get, 2 weeks ago, New York Times saying, oh, this is Biden's border crisis, and what are we going to do about it? It's infuriating. I don't know the answer I mean, that's outside of Carol's list purview in terms of fixing, Facebook and Instagram and Fox News and things like that. There's a lot of things I think that could be done federally in terms of regulating that and making sure that things are fair and not, spreading lies and misinformation and things like that. I think one thing I'm really interested in Montana, so there's that piece, and I'm not someone who says, oh, we can't fix that, so let's just leave it. But honestly, our organization is not going to fix that problem. We'd love to be part of the solution, and pushing back on misinformation and things like that. But what I'm really interested in, and I think other people in the movement are interested in as well, we have a lot of seats we can take back in the legislature, and to find and recruit the most compelling candidates that fit the district that's the number one thing that we can be doing and thinking about right now in terms of our organization. And I'm also thinking, locally, I live in Bozeman, and I'm thinking, I could do some volunteering on some local campaigns as well. Because that way you don't feel like you're, despair. That's a really awful emotion to feel. And I always feel that action is the antidote to that.
Thank you for that. So we have another question here. This one talks about how a acronym that you can apply to Emily's list is early money is like yeast. And they say, what steps is Carol's list taking to make certain its endorsements come early enough in campaigns to help candidates the most by providing timely early assistance?
That's a great question. And honestly, my experience this last cycle was that we didn't do that because we're not Emily's list. Emily's list has, that's their name. Early money is like yeast because it makes the dough rise, is what they were saying there. Our endorsement is, I think it's been a little bit later. We did general election endorsements in August. And so we have been part of the, let's do the trainings, let's see how the candidates are doing, because we want to make sure that they're, good, hardworking candidates. And so that we are not just endorsing people because they're women. We're endorsing women because they're qualified and talented and awesome, and who are going to do everything they can to try to pass great, fair, progressive laws for our state.
Thanks. The next question. So this person is asking, what's a good way to talk with women friends who still think that feminism is a bad word? This person grew up in a small Montana town with all brothers, so she was ingrained in kind of the feminist movement, even though maybe she didn't have the words at that time for her resistance. And then they go on to say, one of my friends was raised in a family of all girls, but they still think that feminism is a bad word. So, how do we communicate with each other and other women about feminism?
I love that question. I also grew up in a small town in eastern Montana, and I feel like I just came out as a feminist. Mostly, I think, because the definition of it to me is equal opportunity. And how can we argue against that? And I think the demonization of the word feminist or feminism, or I won't even repeat what the late Rush Limbaugh used to call us, that's like a 40-year plus backlash, again, brought to us by people in the right-wing media ecosystem. And not liking that word, in my opinion, means that you're letting the opponents who don't think we should go to school, who don't think we should be able to have jobs or, the freedom to make decisions about when or if we have children. Why should we let those folks define what it is? To me, it means equality of opportunity and nothing else. And if people, I don't know, I used to have quite a few discussions with women friends when I was in my 20s about it. I don't know if I did any convincing, but sometimes I feel like allowing our opponents to define that for us and then to shrink away from it because of what the opponents are saying. I mean, we should always push back on bad definitions of words that we enjoy.
I totally agree. This participant is saying, thanks for all you do, Beth. Her question is, how can we join together to use the bills passed in this legislative session and the people who passed them to our advantage?
It depends, I think, what the goal is. For Carol's List, one of our goals this session has been basically if we're going to lose reproductive freedoms and dignity for our LGBTQ friends and voting rights for various people across the state, including Native Americans. I mean, bringing back this, ballot initiative thing that got declared unconstitutional last year and then bringing it back as a bill. I mean, that bill, the Supreme Court said it disenfranchises Native Americans. And so then to bring it back, even though it was just declared unconstitutional, I mean, the whole slate of bills are just garbage and an attack on people's rights and dignity. For us, the goal has been, again, how do we recruit these great, compelling candidates that can work really hard to take back some seats in the next couple of elections? And so for us, it's been highlighting how terrible these bills are, and comments from one of the heads of one of the committees who called women birthers, things like this, just highlighting comments and bad bills, and then asking women, do you hate this? You should run. And then, providing an on-ramp in whatever way we can to have them learn more about that.
Awesome, thank you. These next two questions are kind of more involved with Carol's itself, the work that you guys are doing. So are you involved in the deep canvassing experiment being developed by the Montana Democrats?
We are not. No. Just to be super clear about our capacity, I'm a one-woman shop in terms of paid staff at Carol's List, and I've got an all-volunteer board, and more than half of those board members have demanding day jobs. So it's a question of, we really always have to be asking, is this a strategic thing for us to be doing given the resources that we have? Totally support any deep canvassing efforts or anything people can try that are going to win some hearts and minds. But we're not part of that, unfortunately.
Awesome. So more to that, do you guys have a brick and mortar office in Missoula? And then this question goes on to say, are you the only staff person?
I am the only staff person, and we have a brick and mortar office in my house in Bozeman. You can have a look at it here. Very small but mighty, small and scrappy.
Absolutely. This next question, how can you help us find candidates in Cascade County?
Ooh. Cascade County. I do know a number of women from last cycle who are going to be running again. So that's always great. Just been, keeping in touch with all of them and seeing what their next steps are. In terms of Cascade, being in touch, it's always good to be in touch with the county central committee. And I understand that in Cascade, that's getting, I think, reinvigorated or continued to be vigorous with some of the people that are really active there. There are a lot of different, nonprofits up there. We endorsed and targeted a candidate last cycle who is the head of the LGBTQ plus teen center up there. So it's just always, looking for the women who are already making the difference in their community, and then asking them, you ever thought of running for office? and see what they say. If she says, oh no, I could never do that, then it's like the process of saying, yes, but you already know how to raise money. You already know how to talk to people. Your network is massive. Look at all the things you care about. I mean, our motto basically is if you care and you know how to make a plan and execute that plan, you can do this.
Awesome. Next question. Does Carol's List offer benefits to women running at the county level?
We have not so far. There's a wonderful woman, Juanita Vero, for example, over in Missoula, who had got appointed to the county commission. And then, she got reelected as well. And we talked as an organization, I think in 2019, about whether we were going to be focusing on any county or municipal or more local races down ballot from the legislature. And at that time, we decided we didn't have the capacity to really engage. We focused in 2020 on legislative candidates only in terms of targeting, which means, we bundle money for the candidates, doing online ads for them, and that type of support. And that was only for legislative candidates in 2020.
Awesome. I don't see any more questions, so I'm just gonna ask one of my own before we close out. I know a lot of amazing young women who I've tried to have conversations about them running for office, and I'm always kind of not always, but very frequently met with, I'll do that when my career is in this place. I'll do that once I've had kids. I'll do that once, when I've achieved this thing that I think I need to achieve before I run for office. And I wonder, what's your advice for adding a little urgency to you being a young woman is really important for your representation. Like your unique perspective right now is needed in the legislature. What do you say to people who are always kind of giving you back these timelines, and these sorts of excuses?
Well, I usually say men aren't waiting. That's the first thing I'll say. And then the second thing is making sure that they're hearing from other young women leaders who are already doing that stuff. Really amazing young women leaders like Representative Emma Kerr-Carpenter from over in Billings, freshman Representative Alice Buckley in Bozeman, Representative Katie Sullivan in Missoula. I mean, these are all people, under 40 for sure, who stepped up to do this at a time when that timeline didn't matter to them. And so maybe just making some of those connections and also connecting them with other, youth activists in their area as well, because sometimes it's easier to hear that message from their people in their generational cohort. I mean, I'm 46, and so it might not be the same thing coming from me, but I can sure orchestrate some phone calls where they hear it from not me, if that sometimes helps. And then just making sure that it's something that gets followed up on, so that it is will you run? Will you think about running? How about this year? So that it's just a steady stream of asking. Got to get those 7 asks in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for answering all those questions. For the final part of the talk, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
Great. Thanks, Sophie, and thanks, Beth, for answering all those questions. It looks like we just had one pop in. I'll go ahead and ask it. Is Carol's List supportive of older women with great work-life experience? Ageism is real. Boy, howdy, it always is. Even from younger women, and that is totally true. So what can you say to that if somebody's older and they're thinking about maybe running?
I think looking at our endorsement roster from last year, we endorsed a record number of progressive women candidates last year of all ages. And I think the older women candidates, I just remember putting together some of the endorsement web pages and scrolling through and thinking, oh my God, I mean, this is hundreds of years of amazing life experiences. What an honor to be endorsing endorsing these candidates. And so I think that's great. If you have the life experience, maybe you're retired and you're ready for the next step in leveling up your leadership, I mean, give me a call. I know that older women can be invisible in our culture, and not with us. Like we see you.
Right. We need women of all ages and all experience involved because, like Sophie had said, everyone has that valuable experience right now and they don't have to wait till later. I wanted to follow up just before we go into the final 4 questions here. Somebody had asked about finding candidates in Cascade County, and I thought your answer was great. And I was just having been a candidate before in my own races, but also in watching other women. I wanted to make a suggestion and see what you thought of it. So if somebody, you said to, look at those women who are already doing the work, would it be possible maybe if somebody was interested in like Cascade County, that they could call you and you guys could collaborate to figure out who those people are? Because really, unless you're within certain circles, you may not know. And then so if they could call you and find out who those people are, then they could actually give them a call or shoot them an email and say, hey, I'd love to talk with you about the work you're doing and maybe, you running for office. Is that something that would be possible?
Oh, for sure. And I don't want to make it sound like we do this recruiting work in a vacuum. We work really closely with party structures, different nonprofits, anyone who is interested in candidate recruitment, basically. And so people will definitely fall through the cracks because our networks, again, are not infallible. And certainly there are holes in those networks, especially when it comes to, I'm noticing, recruiting Native American women. We've endorsed and targeted a number of Native American women in the past, but nowhere near the 7-10% that would give us parity. And so I'm always interested in hearing from anybody who wants to nominate a friend. And I'm actually thinking of putting a form on our website for exactly that type of thing, so that women and men can nominate their amazing women friends who probably should think about running, but they would never self-select for something like that because their ego is not giant. And so I'm always interested in any and all ideas in terms of, tapping untapped talent in the state.
So people can support Carol's List by giving you money, which you then support your programs and also support getting women elected. And they can go to your website at carolslistmt.com. Is that correct? Or .org?
.org.
.org. And what is the email that they can reach you at if they would like to just shoot you an email?
The organization email that I check is info at carolslistmt.org.
Perfect. All right, so let's turn it now to these final 4 questions just to let people get to know you a little bit more on a personal level. What's a podcast that you're listening to now that you would recommend to others?
Well, I love a good interview show, just like everyone else does, especially political stuff. I love Hysteria, the Crooked Media women's show. I love Mark Maron's podcast, WTF, because I also like to laugh. But as a former radio and print journalist, I also have to recommend kind of a long form narrative show called Unfinished Short Creek. And it's about a fundamentalist Latter-day Saints community in southern Utah, near where I lived for 4 years. And so really great show, really eye-opening. And there's some amazing women who end up running for office and winning in that show.
All right. So who's your favorite singer?
I spent the entire Trump era listening only to punk rock, heavy metal, and rap. And it's only in the last couple of months that I've kind of shifted into singer-songwriter music again. But I have been obsessed with an album that came out last year by a younger singer-songwriter from Oklahoma, whose name is Samantha Crane. And it's spelled Crain, like pain. Her album, I forget what it's called now because I'm kind of losing the thread, but check it out. Great voice, really cool songs, awesome album.
All right, Samantha Crane. So where's your favorite place to go in Montana?
Makoshika State Park, right outside of Glendive, Montana. It's lots of badlands, and I spent a lot of time there in high school, and I just love that place so much, and any kind of badlandy place like that. I also really like spending time in the prairies in like May and June, just because of the smells. I miss the smells of Eastern Montana.
I'll have to tell Dwayne Ankney that because I think it sounds lovely. What's the best advice you were ever given?
Ooh. I think my first executive director job, this is maybe a decade ago, my kind of mentor at that organization basically just told me, don't take things so hard and don't take them so personally. He was like, you're the ED, you have a lot of power here. Don't freak out. That's basically what he was saying. And not to take things so personally. And I think that's really good advice that I and probably a lot of other people need to hear regularly. It's so easy to get stuck in our little circles, especially right now when we've been, stuck at home for a year. And usually it's not about you.
Right. Well, that is wonderful advice. Thank you. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for talking with us today. Thanks so much, Beth.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. To everyone who's listening today, thanks for listening and attending. We're hosting these talks to provide an opportunity for you to hear about different people and organizations in our state doing some great work and how you become involved shaping your own communities. We have, if you want to reach us, so you can reach us on Facebook at Public Policy Institute of the Rockies, on Twitter at Policy Rockies, Instagram at PPI of the Rockies, and email us at info@pipper.org. If you have some suggestions of other people you'd like to hear, or if you want to give us any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to listen to this talk again or any of our other past talks, these are recorded, and we release them in a podcast format on Podbean or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we also are on MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television, channel 189 at 8:30s on Tuesdays and 6:30s on Fridays. So people can really hear what our guests are talking about. Thank you all for attending today, and let's keep moving Montana forward together. Take care.